puntos de vista y las opiniones expresadas en este programa son de los participantes y no reflejan necesariamente las opiniones de BronxNet o sus colaboradores.
All right, so welcome everyone to this year's Candidates Forum from New York State Senate in Districts 33, 34, and 36. This forum is hosted by the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition and our partner, the Real Rent Reform Coalition. My name is Juan Nunez, and I'm the president of the board of directors here at the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition.
Good evening, everybody. Everybody happy to be here? Yay! My name is Helene Red. I'm the second vice president of Bailey Houses. How's everybody doing? Juan and I will be your moderators for this evening. You guys okay with that?
So there are many reasons why we're here tonight and why we're doing this forum. One of the main reasons we have in this forum is to educate all the voters in this district and to encourage our community to come out and vote, because these local elections are very, very important. We also want to find out who the candidates are for the districts 33, 34, and 36, and where they stand on the issues that matter to all of us here. And most importantly, we want to hold our candidates accountable. So whoever gets elected, we want to make sure that they work hard in Albany for the things that we need here in the Bronx. So we don't want you here only to campaign. It's important that our elected officials know and are concerned about all the issues that we're working on and are organizing every day.
Can you dig that? Yes, ma'am. All right. Now, we have commitment cards that you have received when you came in, which to invite you to get involved with Northwest Bronx, including helping to get out the votes on the upcoming election. We all know voting is important, right? Okay. We want you to bring your families and community to vote in the primaries on Thursday, September the 13th, and the general election on Tuesday, November the 6th. Is everyone going to vote? That's good to hear. Now, what you heard from the candidates today, we'd like for you all to join us in ensuring our community engaged in the upcoming elections. If you like to help with getting you like to help with getting out the vote drives, please be sure to indicate that on your commitment card. Everyone sign the commitment card, please.
Also, the Northwest Bronx, we organize on many issues in the community, issues that you're going to hear about today during the Candidates Forum. Each of you should have received a calendar with upcoming events that the Northwest Bronx is organizing or supporting, and we encourage you to get involved. Whether you're having issues with rent being too high, with landlords not making repairs, whether your kid got suspended in school for wearing a hat, if you're looking for health care, if you're having trouble paying for health care, please join us, because we're organizing in all these issues throughout the community.
And now, we want to welcome the candidates. We invited every elected official candidate for Senate Districts 33, 34, and 36, because our members live in those districts, those three districts. Today, we welcome Senator Gustavo Rivera. He's Democrat representing the 33rd District. And we have Senator Jamaal Bailey. Democrat representing the 36th District. And last but not least, Alessandra Biaggi, a Democrat candidate running in the 34th District. We also invited Nicole Torres, Republican, and Stephen Stern, Conservative for the 33rd District, Senator Jeffrey Klein, Democrat, and Antonio Vitello, Conservative for District 34, and Robert Diamond, Conservative for District 36. We are disappointed that they couldn't join us this evening, and we're grateful for the candidates that we do have tonight. Ow. We have a number of Northwest Bronx members who have prepared questions and based on the issues we are organizing around this year. And we also are taking questions from audience members. Everyone has received an index card to write your question on. And there are volunteers going around who will be collecting these cards during the course of the evening. Please write your name and address on your card so the candidates know who these questions are coming from, please. Now, we won't have opportunity to ask all the questions on the cards, but our volunteers will work to make sure we address as many as possible. Are you okay with that?
So we're going to have an opening questions for the candidates, and then it's going to be followed by members of the community and of the Northwest Bronx Coalition and the Real Rent Reform Coalition. They're going to ask you specific questions. For each question, you're going to have 2 minutes to respond. We need to be very respectful of the time we have together, so please be mindful that if you speak past the time, we might have to cut you off, all right? In 2 minutes, the first question is, in 2 minutes, we'd like for you to share a little bit about yourself and your accomplishments and why you have chosen to run for state senate in your district. Let's start with Gustavo Rivera, and then we're going to go to Jamaal, and then finally Alexandra, okay?
Maybe I should just speak louder.
Maybe you should just.
Or maybe I should just turn on the microphone. Good evening to everyone. I want to first of all thank the Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition. No, I'm good here.
Because if I do this, it's not going to
There you go. There you go.
I've been in this room plenty. This is in my district, so this is bad, you know. Anyway, my time is running out, so I will say it quickly. Thank you all for being here, not only for the Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition, but for each of you being here. Being civically involved is incredibly important. It is necessary for you folks, for all of our constituents to be involved, to be engaged, so I'm glad that you're here, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Now, I've been the state senator in this district, the 33rd District, for 8 years. It's a long time. You can tell by some of I got white hairs like right here, I swear. And here, too, I swear. But in that time, I've had a lot of successes. I have not been in the minority. I've only been in the minority. I haven't been in the majority yet. I'll get to that shortly. But I have been very privileged to represent this district. Among some of the things that I've been able to achieve, I passed the Charitable Bail Organization Bill, which made it possible for charitable bail organizations to exist in the state of New York. Thank you. I was able to secure the transfer of the Fulton Correctional Facility, former correctional facility, now to be turned into a one-of-a-kind reentry facility that is in the southern part of my district. I was able to help secure a $138 million state loan for the Kingsbridge Armory so that project could go forward. And as far as what I intend to do next year, I am very hopeful that with this gentleman right here, I'll be able to join the majority. And I am both the sponsor of the single-payer bill to create a single-payer system in the state of New York. And last but not least, one of my priorities is to pass Dakota's law, which I introduced recently, which this lady right here, Tisha Jones, helped me to write. So thank you for that. I look forward to your questions, and I look forward to continuing to represent you for as long as you folks will have me. Thank you.
And now let's give it up for Jamaal Bailey.
So, good afternoon. I got two little kids. I never know what time it actually is. Good evening, everybody. So my name is Jamaal Bailey. I represent the 36th Senatorial District, covering the northeast and northwest portion of the Bronx and the majority of the city of Mount Vernon. This is my first term, and I hope that it is not my last. I have certainly enjoyed representing you in the state senate, and I'm focused on a lot of things, but I just want to, in my elevator speech, give you a little bit about who I am and where I come from. I'm from the northeast Bronx, born and raised. I've lived in my district my entire life, and I I take this representation personally. 318,000 people rely on me to represent them in the state Senate, and I take that very, very, very seriously. And when I do that, I go to Albany to fight for housing issues. I fight for criminal justice reform. I am the lead sponsor of Khalif's Law, a speedy trial bill, which we hope to get passed in Albany this coming year. I am also the lead sponsor of discovery reform, which is one of the things that we are sorely lacking in our criminal justice system. I'm sure we'll get to that point later, so not to belabor the point. I'm just very happy and excited to work with such an organization who really cares about doing things from the bottom up, because at the end of the day, we are all equal in our concerns and cares. At the end of the day, we want the same things. We want good schools for our kids, good jobs, and a safe place to live. That's really what we want, right? But how do we achieve that? We achieve that through getting a majority in the state Senate so that we can finally get things done that we've been waiting for longer than 8 years, for longer than that, just to make sure that we have egalitarian and we have what's fair and what's right in the state Senate. So I look forward to your questions, and I'm grateful for my senator to my left to welcome me and to open arms into his district. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jamaal. And last but not least, Alexandra Biaggi.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Yes. Wonderful. Thank you so much to the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition for having me here today. For many of you, it's the first time that you're meeting me, so it's nice to meet all of you. My name is Alessandra Biaggi. I am a candidate for the State Senate in the 34th State Senate District. I am fourth generation in this district. My great-grandparents, grandparents, parents all grew up in the Bronx. I was born in Mount Vernon. I was raised in Pelham, and I came of age in the Bronx. I am very proud to call the 34th State Senate District my home. I am also an attorney. I am a graduate of Fordham Law School, right down the road. Yes. And NYU, and I have served in government twice now. So first as the Assistant General Counsel in the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. That was an office that was helping to rebuild New York after Hurricane Sandy. I also served in the Governor's Executive Chamber in his counsel's office, overseeing things like women's health, women's issues, immigrant rights, affordable housing, and the list goes on. I am very excited about what we can do if we have a majority in the state Senate in New York State. Some of my priorities, which you'll hear, I'm sure, through your questions as well, include things like closing the loopholes in our rent laws, voting reform, health care, thank you, criminal justice reform. I am in a district with Rikers Island. We should be talking about criminal justice reform every single day. It is imperative. Thank you. Education, the fully funding of our public schools. My time is up, but what I will say is I'm very excited to hear from each and every one of you. I look forward to answering your questions, and if I don't get to them today, I have 2 people from my team here, and if you want to follow up with me, you can reach out to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, candidates. Now we're going to move on to our platform issues. We will now hear from the members of the Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition and co-sponsoring partners who will ask questions related to the issues we organize on. Again, remember, each person has 2 minutes to ask questions, and each candidate has up to 2 minutes to respond.
So first, we're going to have housing leader Janicet Estrella. She is a leader from our Housing Justice Committee and member of the Real Rent Reform Coalition.
Good evening. My name is Janicet Estrella. I live on 2770 Kingsbridge Terrace, the 33rd Senate District. The Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition is a member of a Real Rent Reform Coalition, and we have been reaching out, many of you already, trying to close the loopholes that incentivize landlords to harass tenants out of the apartments. In response to these loopholes, we want to repeal vacancy control so landlords will no longer be able to turn apartments into market rates, apartments when the rent reaches $2,700. Make preferential rent permanent so landlords can no longer hike the rent up hundreds of dollars to push tenants out of the apartments. Repeal the 20% vacancy bonus, which currently incentivizes landlords to push them out, and eliminate major capital improvement MCIs, which give the landlord additional way to raise rent, often illegally, and which result in permanent rent increases for tenants. There are several organizations working on the legislation right now, and we are looking for a sponsor. Do we have your support for this rent reforms?
All right, we're going to start Senator Bailey. We'll start with you this time, and then we'll go to Senator Rivera, and finally, Alexandra Biaggi.
So I don't need 2 minutes on this. Yes, right? So, but I'm going to tell you that I am a co-sponsor on all of these bills. The vacancy decontrol, I believe that's 3482. Preferential rent bill is 6527, and the vacancy bonus repeal is 1593. I'm a co-sponsor on all of these bills, and I think I co-sponsored them in the first year of my tenure as a state senator. So I am committed to this. My name is on there, and as the ranking member on the Housing Committee, these are things that are near and dear to my heart. I never grew up, I didn't grow up in an apartment, I grew up in a house. But New York is a renter city, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of our renters. We understand landlords, and landlords have to have certain things so that they can have places for us to live, right? At the end of the day, we live here, this is our city. So I am in support of that. And in terms of the bill that you said, the MCI, obviously I am in support of the concept, but in terms of legislation, I can't commit to legislation until I see the draft. If you give me a draft and I see specifically what it is, then I can commit to it. I like to be above board and honest with anything, and conceptually, yes, I'm 100% in agreement, but I need to see the actual language of it, because otherwise I'd be disingenuous in telling you that I'm going to support it for support's sake, and that's not something that I'm willing to do.
Thank you, Senator Bailey.
I could do this, ditto, and I'd be basically done. One thing I'd like to add, so he mentioned something, he kind of just threw it to the side. He's currently the ranking member in the Housing Committee in the Senate, which means that once we become the majority, he will be the chair of the Housing Committee in the Senate. That deserves an applause. Or codes too, but it's housing, man, come on. Point is that I'm a co-sponsor of all of these bills, ma'am. I'm also, I'm a tenant myself. I live not that far away, 195th and University, and I always say that if it wasn't for rent stabilization, I wouldn't have been able to live in this city, much less thrive in this city. My district has the second most number of rent stabilized units in all the state Senate districts. I have about 70,000 units in my district. It is incredibly important and essential for this to be protected. We can talk day and night about the construction of new units, but we will never be able to build as many units as we are losing at the same speed that we're losing them. So we need to maintain that stock. So I am a co-sponsor on all these bills, the one on vacancy decontrol, the one on preferential rent, the one on vacancy bonus, and as far as MCI, there's a whole bunch of bills. I am a co-sponsor on some of them, not all of them, but I'm looking them through, and just like Senator Bailey said, on concept, I'm actually a big part of the MCI coalition, the MCI coalition, which actually aims to we've been pushing DHCR to change some of their policies, and we're seeking also legislative changes to make sure that that is not something that landlords can use to kick people out of their homes. So on all of this, you have my commitment full 100%.
Thank you.
And thank you, Senator Gustavo. And now, Alessandra.
Yes. So I will just say that there is an absolute housing crisis, not only in New York City, but across New York State, and that is no different in District 34. And I'm going to start here because I think it's very important. Not only do I support closing the loopholes on eviction bonuses, preferential rent, repealing the Erdstat law, ensuring that if landlords are going to do major capital improvements, that they provide receipts. It is really just insane, in my opinion, that they have been able to get away with this, and so I'm going to call it for what it is. It's an abuse of the system. And so I am running against someone who, for his tenure in the state Senate, we've lost 95,000 rent stabilized units. That is housing for 300,000 people. With a Democratic majority that is secure, we can ensure that these things can get done. And it is exciting to sit next to two state senators who have championed these things. But what I will say is that without someone in this seat who prioritizes these issues, we will never have these things. And so I am committed to making sure not only that we repeal vacancy decontrol, that preferential rent is permanent, that we eliminate major capital improvements, that we repeal the vacancy bonus, but we have to ensure that once these things are done, that it never happens again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answers. Now we have two more leaders from housing, including Jazz Hooks and Brian Griffin from the Housing Committee, with additional questions about rent regulations. So let's give it up now for Jazz Hooks. Jazz.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jazz, and I live on 196 and Valentine Avenue in New York's 33rd District. So my question is, our communities are experiencing massive displacement, which favors developers who seek to gentrify our neighborhoods. We need a guaranteed right to housing for all. So would you support a universal rent control bill that would close the loopholes on rent stabilization law, reclaim the units that have been removed from regulation, and expand rent stabilization to cover every multifamily building in the state with more than 6 units?
All right, we're going to start with Alessandra Biaggi this time. Alessandra?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. I started out my legal career as a legal fellow in New York State Homes and Community Renewal. That is New York's housing agency. One of the things that I focused on was affordable housing, not only making sure that it didn't fall off of the market, but that the units that existed, that when developers came to New York or were in New York and said, we're going to build developments that will provide affordable housing and receive a subsidy in return, that they were held accountable. That is something that I'm not only committed to, but supporting a universal rent control bill it's almost part and parcel with this. So yes, absolutely, and it will be a priority of mine. Housing is incredibly essential. It is a human right to be able to not only have 4 walls around you, but to be able to stay in your neighborhood, to be able to stay in your home, to be able to grow a family. Thank you. To be able to just be in the place that you want to be in New York, we need to do that. So yes.
All right, thank you, Alessandra. We're now going to go to Senator Rivera and then Jamaal Bailey.
So I would say, very similar to what Senator Bailey said earlier, conceptually I'm supportive of the bill, supportive of the idea, but I'd want to see what the details of the bill are. And if there's language that you have, that you folks have prepared, that the Real Rent Reform Campaign has been preparing, I would love to look at it and explore whether there's things that need to be done to it to make it better. But conceptually, I'm down. I just need to look at the actual text of the bill before I sign on completely.
I would say the same exact thing with one caveat. See, I represent Westchester County as well, and being a state senator represents 2 counties that have different issues that I have to be mindful of, right? I don't just represent the city of New York, so I have to be mindful about how this is applied across the board in every single county, right? So when we're implementing things that are for statewide, when we're implementing statewide laws, we have to be mindful how this is going to be not just in the Bronx and Brooklyn, but Batavia County as well. And we kind of have to think about that, even though I know we're struggling here. And again, I'm with you on the details, but we just have to make sure that it matches region by region, that we're being fair to each region.
All right, thank you. Just want to encourage the candidates to slow down a little bit for interpretation so she can be able to interpret. Thank you. And now give it up for Brian. Brian, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. First, I want to say thank you for allowing us to have an open forum and a dialogue with this panel. I'm Brian Griffin, who is representing the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition of New York City. Under the Erstat law in New York City, which is currently banned from enacting rent limitations that are stronger than those preceded by the state, meaning that we cannot pass stronger housing laws protect our rapidly disappearing affordable housing on the city level. My question to the panel is, would you support repealing the Erstat law so we can bring the home rule back into our city? We are asking that you review the state laws which will provide affordable housing for the people here in this city, like those residents in upstate New York. Thank you.
We're going to start with Senator Rivera, then Senator Bailey, and then Senator Biaggi.
Why you keep turning this off, bro? You keep turning it off, bro. Come on, man. The answer to your question is yes. I am absolutely supportive of getting rid of Erstat. And I have been advocating for it since I became a senator in 2010. So I'm down to do it. Funny enough, the folks that have led the Senate in the majority, so for the whole time that I've been in the Senate, the majority has been controlled by the Republican Party. And in that period of time, the people who have led the Housing Committee are folks who have, in some instances, literally more cows than people in their districts. So I believe that this is one of the things that we need to do. The reason why it's so important to make sure that we have a Democratic majority is because most of those rent-stabilized units are where?
Yes.
Right here. And having someone who is leading that committee, who is from here, from the city of New York, certainly with an understanding that any laws that have to be passed for the entire state should be thought out just how they impact the rest of the state. But if we're talking about rent-stabilized units, most of them are here. We should be not only led by someone in the committee who is from the city of New York, but also, as it refers to that law, we should get rid of it so that home rule belongs to the city of New York when it comes to apartments here.
All right.
Thank you, Senator.
So the short answer, yes. You always want to make sure that you're giving municipalities, you always want to make sure that you're giving municipalities the ability to be able to regulate themselves. So that's essentially my answer, so I don't belabor the point. I'm looking forward to a majority in the Senate so we can do that next year. So yes.
Okay.
And then lastly, yes. So yes, it's not only critical to making sure that we have rent-stabilized units that stay as rent-stabilized units, but that we have people who are overseeing these laws be from the place that it's affected by. That's incredibly important. And so yes, the answer is yes.
So you're, in essence,
Repeal it. Yeah, I support the
you're
repeal
try and
of the
repeal
Erstat law.
the Erstat law,
Yes,
so
and
we can
have a
have
local
more
rule.
affordable housing.
Yes.
And make it much more comfortable. It seems like that the scale is slightly imbalanced. The people here in the city is getting one deal, the upstate is getting another. How can we, and I'm just talking in general, how can we, or you as the panel, make sure that we have an even playing in terms of affordable housing?
I mean, one of the ways to do that is, if you don't mind, is to repeal the Erstat law,
Yes.
right? That's step number one.
That is the main issue.
And ensuring that it actually stays repealed, right? That there's no other bills that are proposed to undo that progress that's done. I attended the Rent Guidelines Board's hearings, and I've attended them before, but this year specifically at Hostess Community College, and listening to people who work 1 job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, who can't afford really any borough, honestly, at this point, be worried about losing their homes, be worried about not being able to stay in their communities, some people who are on the verge of homelessness. This is a larger issue when it comes to affordable housing, and this, again, is the first step. We have to do this because there's no other locality that understands the housing market than New York City.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay.
How's everybody so far? Good. Everybody's good? All right. Finally, we have a question about NYCHA. Yes. That will be asked by my president, Tisha Jones. President of Bailey Housing Resident Council. Give it up for Tisha. Tisha.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tisha Jones. I'm the president of Bailey Houses, and I live in the 33rd District. Elevated lead levels in NYCHA buildings has received a lot of attention this year. Senate Bill 9131, also known as Dakota's Law, requires the Health Department to establish a hotline for physicians to report elevated lead levels and requires insurance companies to cover testing for elevated lead levels for both private and public housing. We would like to thank Senator Gustavo Rivera for introducing this bill. My question to the other two candidates is, will you co-sponsor Dakota's Law?
We're going to start with...
Ladies first, bro.
We're going to start with Senator Bailey.
So Gustavo can attest to this. The day after the article came out in the newspaper, I called him up and I said, I want to be on this bill. That's 100%. I want on this bill. I'm not sure if I'm on the bill yet, but I called him up and said, this is a great bill. So 100%. If I'm not already on the bill as a co-sponsor, I certainly am. And I'm very disappointed that the Bailey houses are in your district. Because I'm Bailey, right? You didn't even invite me to your family day. You know, it's my name and everything, right? That's messed up, right? That's messed up, Gustavo. But yes.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely yes. I have started to think about the NYCHA issue in ways that I think that people on my team probably will be mad at me for saying this, but I think that what's going on in NYCHA is a state of emergency in many ways. There is billions of dollars that are owed to these housing developments, and this is an important step, right, into ensuring that the people who actually have lead poisoning are being accounted for, that we can keep track of that. But one step further, right, I'm running against someone who has talked about giving $500 million, right, as being part of this slate of people who gave $500 million to NYCHA. Where have they been?
Right.
NYCHA housing is owed billions of dollars, and we have to figure out a way to get it. If the state doesn't have it, then we need to think about how we're going to use our federal allies to ensure that we get it, because that's how we started this issue in the first place.
My second question is...
Hold on, before you do that.
Okay.
I actually want to take a second. So it is my bill, but I want to make it clear and public. This bill would not exist without this wonderful woman right here, Tisha Jones. Give her a hand, please. I am incredibly proud that in my legislative history, a lot of the most important bills that I've been a sponsor of and that I've been able to pass, and we're going to pass this, have come from organizations or individuals in my district that had issues that brought to me and said, can we fix this legislatively? This lady sat down and said, this is the experience that my daughter and I had. I want to make sure that no other child suffers this. And we went like step by step by step. What can we do to fix this legislatively? And it is a comprehensive piece of bill, a thought-through piece of bill, That doesn't make no sense. A thought-through piece of legislation, and it would not be possible or have existed at all without Tisha Jones. I want to make sure I give her that credit.
Thank you. My second question to you, to all of you, what will you do to protect lead-affected children?
Jamaal?
So, I believe that there is some legislation that's already in the state Senate which has not advanced on our side. It was introduced, Senator Kruger. I don't want to say sponsors' names without being factually correct. But I believe there is some legislation that has already been introduced. Senate Democratic Conference has been the leaders. We've been the leaders on this issue concerning NYCHA. We've, as the ranking member of the Housing Committee, I brought up the former chair of NYCHA multiple times to speak about lead. We've had multiple conversations about, the effects of lead on children and the chronic disinvestment that NYCHA has. Because, NYCHA's been doing some not so great things, but let's be very clear that they've been handed an unfunded mandate for a very long time. And it's not just the state, not just the city. The federal government has been disinvesting in public housing throughout the country, not just the city of New York. So we have to be fair in what the level of this investment is. But that doesn't mean that we don't, as elected officials, have to do more monitoring about lead in children, because we've seen what the effects are if we don't monitor it properly, and if you don't get the children who are affected by lead in proper testing programs and treatment programs. So rest assured that the Senate Democratic Conference is in support of making sure that we not regulate, but do something about lead in children.
Alessandra?
One of the first things I think that we have to do, so I agree with everything that Senator Bailey said, and also it requires listening, it requires showing up, it requires partnering, it requires bringing people to the table to have a discussion about these things, to hear what's going on and how you can collectively fix these problems. It's not just, right, unfortunately, the state Senate doesn't have a magic wand. It requires every single one of us to not only participate, but to come to the table and to make sure that these issues are heard. One voice is very strong, but many voices allow for these things to rise to the surface. And especially with this issue, it's going to take many people. And so it's all of the things, again, that Senator Bailey said, but it also requires us to partner, to make noise, to listen, and to hold everybody accountable, including myself and our elected officials across the state.
Thank you.
Well, and I'll be quick. Part of it certainly is passing Dakota's law, but there's also a couple of other bills, including, I'm pretty sure that it's Kruger actually, that there's a series of bills from our Democratic colleagues who all are based around this issue. But rest assured that we're on it. We're going to be pushing for it, and hopefully, as part of the majority. And by the way, so in the case that we become the majority next year, when we become the majority next year, I'll be the chair of the Health Committee in the Senate. So that means that bills like this that have to do with the health of children, I'm the one that's going to be getting them out of committee and onto the floor. So there's that.
Yes.
I just want to say one thing, that lead is not only a NYCHA issue, it's a New York State issue, and we must protect all children, private and public housing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now we have two youth leaders from Sisters and Brother United who have a question on education. Education and youth justice. Their names are Jordani Badilio and Wesley Guzman. I tried.
So, good evening. My name is Jordani Badillo, and I recently graduated from MS 129 middle school, which was a school that had more than 30 students in the classroom with only one teacher. And although I'm excited to enter Belmont Preparatory High School this fall, I am also concerned knowing that both my middle school and high school are still owed close to $1 million from a lawsuit parents won in 2006, just 3 years after I was born.
Just reminded me how old.
I am here because the decision made by the elected officials in the office will not only affect me directly, it will also affect our community for the long run. So I'm here to ask you, how will you ensure that New York State and Governor Cuomo comply with the lawsuit parents won 10 years ago that proved that the state of New York failed to provide a sound basic education for us? So basically, will you guys ensure that in my time in school and not 10 more years later? And also, New York State is given the $4.3 billion, including the $1.9 billion owed to New York City through this lawsuit, and ensure high needs school are prioritized in the distribution of these funds.
All right. Senator Badillo, correct?
Yeah, Badillo.
First of all, thank you for, the only reason I chuckled earlier when you mentioned 2003, and then you said only 3 years before I was born, is because you made me feel old. It was not. I was not laughing at the premise of your question. I was just like, I'm freaking old. Thank you for being here. That makes you what, 15? 14?
Yeah.
14, 15, 14. So 14. So thank you for being here. I'm terrible at math, people. I'm not a math professor up here. Thank you for being up here at this young age. I want to make sure that you continue to be involved and engaged. So I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad that you're here. To answer your question, yes, what the gentleman is referring to, and I'm sure everyone in this room knows, there was a lawsuit that is referred to as the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, or CFE, which was brought against the state, and ultimately parents won. And this lawsuit was simple. It said that the state had defunded or had not funded appropriately schools in the city of New York. So we have been fighting to get that money for a long time. I will tell you that I've been fighting for it since I've been in the Senate, since 2011. The difference is that next year, hopefully, we'll be in the majority. Not only that, but the chair of the Education Committee will be a Democrat as well, and probably a Democrat from the city of New York, who will very likely have this as a very top priority. So when we're fighting to put a budget together, we do so by starting to pay down the debt that we owe the schools and the children in the state of New York, in the city of New York. So you have my commitment to continue to do that. And thank you for being here.
So I'm very impressed by the fact that you're here at 14 years old. At 14 years old during the summer, I was playing video games or basketball, not being involved in my community till you are. So, and you might chuckle or laugh at that, but it's very important that this is where it starts. So I commend you for that. So thank you for coming here. It's very important. I'm a public education kid, K through JD. Every level of education, from kindergarten through law school, has been a public school for me. So I fully understand, and I fully understand the need to fully fund CFE. This is something that I have been pushing as a freshman member, that we, Gustavo and I, as members of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus, the caucus has been championing this ever since the lawsuit has come out. So the caucus has been pushing it, I'm pushing it, and we're going to continue to push it, and we are hopeful that we can close that budget gap. And I will just tell you that budgets are made by, they are drafted, they are created by executives, but they're negotiated with the legislative branch. So even when we get the majority, we still have to make sure that we negotiate with the executive branch, the governor, the executive branch meaning the governor. So we need to make sure that even if we do have all Democrats, the Assembly, Senate, and governor, we've got to make sure that we're negotiating in favor of our children.
Yes, I am very committed to fully funding our public schools, and I will just say the fully funding of our public schools is not only essential to make sure that every child in every zip code has access to quality education, the same education, but so that we can start thinking about things like civics and putting civics into classrooms and having more people that are young, like yourself, be civically engaged, because your civic engagement now means that you are more likely to be a leader in your community, in your city, in your state, in the country, and we need more leaders who are empowered from a very young age. So 100% yes. Overcrowding is a symptom of underfunding. In District 34, the district is owed $88 million. And what I will say is this: we have had someone in District 34 that has had a seat at that budget table, who did not prioritize the full funding of our public schools, who has prioritized charter school funding over public school funding. And so we've received crumbs, truly, to a lot of our schools in District 34. It is incredibly important. I went to all of the Pelham public schools, and what I notice and what I have seen and experienced in my life is that because of this district being as diverse and disparate as it is, in areas like Pelham and even Riverdale, the schools are very different than they are in Hunts Point and Castle Hill and Parkchester. Yes. You have teachers in Castle Hill who are coming in on the weekends for free to teach things like coding because they can't get funding to do it during the school year. Right now, we have an unemployment that is very low, but we have a skills gap, and that starts in the classroom. So being able to actually compete, not only at a state level, but at a national level and at an international level, really requires that we are fully funding our public schools. And so that was a very long answer to your question, but all of those things are very much related and incredibly important to me. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jordan.
you for your time.
Now we have Wesley Guzman.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Wesley, and I'm a youth leader at Sisters and Brothers United. I'll be asking these questions on behalf of Liberty Mercedes, who could not be here today. This is her statement. She lives around 3433 Gates Place, which is the 36th district. Liberty writes, I currently attend DeWitt Clinton High School. I will be entering my junior year, a crucial year for my college selection process. I'm here because while I'm looking for support from my school around my college application process, many New York State schools invest more resources in harsh discipline practices like suspensions, summonses, and arrests. Many schools in our community, like mine, invest more in practices that push out Black, Latinx, LGBTQIA, and students with disabilities at alarming rates, instead of devoting energy and resources into helping us succeed. We know that Black and Latinx students make up almost 90% of students who are suspended or arrested in schools. So, this is a two-part question. One, how will you ensure that New York State school discipline policies and practices no longer disproportionately target students of color, particularly Black, Latinx, LGBTQ, and students with disabilities? And will you support us as we fight for the implementation of restorative practices and alternative to punitive methods currently used in schools?
We're going to start with Alexandra Biaggi.
Alessandra, yes. So thank you for both of these important questions. To answer,
one.
I'm sorry?
I still have one.
Oh, you have one more?
Yeah, that was the first question.
Oh, sorry.
My second question is related to Bill S. 3036, also known as the Judge Judith S.K. Safe and Supportive Bill, which was introduced to end suspensions for kindergarten through third grade, limit long suspensions to 20 days instead of 90 days, and also eliminate suspensions completely for minor infractions. Will you commit to passing Bill S. 3036, make New York State lead the way in ending the school-to-prison pipeline? And will you stop supporting bills that further invest in police in schools?
So part one of your first question, I think, is related to the second question, because one of the ways to eliminate punishment is to pass this bill, right? The Safe and Supportive Bill, the Judge Judith K. Safe and Supportive Bill. One of the things that I often talk about is implementing wellness into schools. That's not just about safe relationships. It's also about implementing programs that can reduce anxiety, that can teach children and young adults how to deal with anger, how to deal with aggression, how to deal with the feelings that they feel, how to put words to the things that they're feeling instead of reacting to it. And so it's incredibly important that we also invest in these measures too, because when we do those things and we implement these things, I mean, what we've seen is a reduction in violence, in aggression, in depression, and anxiety. So absolutely yes. Again, I want to just reiterate that in District 34, Rikers Island sits. There is a very clear school-to-prison pipeline, and one of the things that we cannot ignore is that it affects Black and brown children more than it affects white children. And ending things like cash bail and having speedy trial reform and open discovery are ways to address this. But going back to the symptom in the communities, it's important to have restorative justice, to focus on rehabilitation as opposed to punishment, to try to provide services and support through the community that allows people to feel as if they are able to, without lack of a better word, just feel supported and be less alone. A lot of what we're seeing, I think, goes back to feeling alone and not feeling as if your neighbors or your school or your community is there to support you. And so these are some of the ways. Jamaal.
So thank you as well, and I don't want to be mindful. Both of you are great young leaders. So the first, I'm going to answer your questions in reverse order. Senator Montgomery's bill at 3036. I am not a co-sponsor, but I will co-sponsor it. I'm not sure why I wasn't on the bill, but when I was in CUNY Law School, I used to work on my 1L year. I used to work on the suspension representation project, and so I firsthand saw the ridiculous things that children were suspended for you have your hat on backwards, for you have your shoelaces untied, and it became, as opposed to discipline, it became punishment. They were punishing kids for no reason, and I got a chance to go in and argue with folks and saying, why did you really suspend this young man or this young woman? What was the actual rationale? And how was suspending them for this now going to help them become a better student? Because if they're in school to learn, you hope that it's so that they can get an education and become a productive member of society, not to unduly punish them and to perpetuate the school to prison pipeline, right? And that's what these suspensions do, so you have my commitment in that respect. Senator Rivera and I were part of budget negotiations where we would not support a bill that one of our colleagues wanted to put police officers in every schools, so we held firm on that. That's one of the things that we were able to get, that we would not go for that. They wanted to put cops in every school, and Senator Rivera and myself and other members of the Senate Democratic Conference said no. And I want to, speak about a bill that I was able to get passed this year, passed the Assembly and the Senate, and hopefully the governor will sign it. Bill number S8000. It is about studying trauma, the effects of trauma on our children. And when we think of trauma, we think of one singular event, but trauma is something that can occur over the course of somebody's lifetime, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences that can lead to risky behavior going on and forward. So I passed that bill, and hopefully the governor will sign it, because I understand that when you go into school, it's more than just your attitude, your aptitude. It's your attitude. It's, are you eating that day? There are so many different things that affect a child. And I know my time is up, but it's really important that we understand the whole child and not just teach to a test and just teach to curriculum.
Senor Guzman, I will thank you as well. How old are you, man?
15.
So I can still feel old. Thank you. That's great. Anyway. But in all seriousness, I agree with everything that my colleagues have said. I am not a sponsor on that bill currently. I was trying to read it now. That's why I was looking like this. It's a long bill, so I would tell you that I'm pretty sure that I would be supportive of it. I'm supportive of a lot of other bills sponsored by Senator Velmanet Montgomery, who's the sponsor from Brooklyn. I'll have to read it, so I will make sure that I touch base with my staff so that we can let you folks know if I sign on. I think that I will, but I got to read the whole thing to make sure that I'm good. And I would say that I absolutely agree both with your question, with the concept of your question, and with your shirt. Counselors, not cops. That's pretty clear right there. We should not, we should not create an environment that is teaching our children to be part of the criminal justice system. That is not why we should be spending resources within our educational facilities. We should be spending resources on educating children, not teaching them what it's like to be incarcerated. So I am very much supportive of making sure that we put our resources in the right place, and I'm hopefully working along with you and the rest of the crew at Sisters and Brothers United, we can get that done. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
All right, great. Who's Bronx? Who's Bronx? Great. And now we have Sean Butler from the Health and Justice Committee. We're going to ask some questions around health and justice.
Hello, guys. Thank you guys for all coming out. You guys give yourself a round of applause for just being here. All right. So My name is Sean Butler. I'm from the Health Justice Committee, and for the most part, everyone from the Health Justice Committee, we actually do community work for a living. So whether it's Chaya from Mekong, who works around the Vietnamese and Cambodian community around trauma, or Karen Washington, who does work around organizing black farmers, or myself, who do a healthy living initiative called Team Healthy Heart, which focuses on nutrition, fitness, and life skills training. And also do SDH training with the adults. I'll go into what SDH training means in a bit. But for the most part, everyone is on board with, when you do this work and you go to your community, it just doesn't turn off. Like, it's on, it's a constant. So with that being, can't forget April Hurley from the Mary Mitchell Center, who does work around youth engagement as far as like community gardens and things of that nature. So with that being said, it just doesn't turn off. So these bills and everything, the policies, it really means a lot to us, because we come together as, we do the work as individuals, but we come together as a team with the Health Justice Committee to try to push these things forth. All right, so in the past year, the Northwest Bronx Health Justice Committee members, we have joined organizations across the country to push for several public health policies, including health care for all. We want to ask you directly, will you support the policy at a state level, and will you ensure that everyone, and I do mean everyone, has access to health care? Yes or no? And for Senator Rivera, we know that you are the sponsor for the Health Care for All Bill S-4840.
So it'd be funny if I didn't support it. I'm just saying. Go ahead.
What are you planning to do to ensure that this health bill includes the most vulnerable members of our community, including immigrants, youth, LGBTQ, and other served community members?
Thank you for your question, sir. Now, as you mentioned there, I am currently, not only, I said I'm the ranking member of the Health Committee. When we get to the majority, I'll be the chair of the Health Committee, but I'm also the prime sponsor of the New York Health Act, which would create a single-payer healthcare for all system in the state of New York. Now, this simply means, and that deserves an applause, because we would not be where we are without maybe some of the folks in this room. A lot of advocacy has gone into this. We have currently 31 sponsors in the Senate. I am very much looking forward to getting into the majority next year with hopefully more than 32. I have a commitment from everyone who is currently a candidate running for Senate across the state. Anybody who's a Democratic candidate that I've been able to speak to, I've gotten a commitment that they will be sponsors of the bill if they get into the Senate. So hopefully, we will have more than 32 going in. And it is a system that will be, there was actually a study that just came out a couple of weeks ago, not from some crazy left-wing organization, but from an organization called the RAND organization. It is a conservative organization, and even they found that this is, wait for it, the most fiscally sound option. It actually, yes, and I like to use that for my Republican colleagues. This is actually the most fiscally sound option. And what it would do is it would cover everybody, regardless of your gender, regardless of your age, regardless of your immigration status. If you are in New York, if you're a human being that resides here, you get sick, we'll make sure that you have coverage, and we actually have it, the payment for it will be a graduated assessment. In other words, it means that folks who will be able to pay for it, it would actually be more equitably distributed. So we're not gonna have, we're gonna make sure that everybody, regardless of whether you're black, white, or orange. I'll wait for that one. If you're a New Yorker, you will have access to the same system, so you have my commitment that next year we're going to do everything that we can to get it passed.
Okay.
All right, Jamaal.
So long story short, yes, I'm one of the 31 members of the State Senate Democratic Conference who is happily co-sponsored Senator Rivera's bill. But I want to go to some of the other things that you mentioned about how important healthcare is to our community, about how preventative health is, and some of the things that we should be doing as legislators to encourage healthy living. So I got a bill that didn't pass the Assembly, but passed the Senate about implementing a healthy living curriculum in the state of New York. So I got that bill passed in the Senate. So hopefully we can get that done in the Assembly next year. I got a bill that passed both houses about studying food waste and the effects of food waste, not only economically on us, but physically on us, and what we don't consume and how we choose to consume it. Also highlighting community gardens in the Northeast Bronx, where I'm from. We have an amazing community garden. It's called Bissell Gardens. It's right at the border of right close to the border of Westchester County, and we are encouraging younger people to get involved with growing what you eat. I was actually honored at an event where Ms. Washington was as well, and she spoke to me about her work as an urban farmer. And it's critically important that we continue to advocate for healthcare, advocate for wellness, not just healthcare, right? Because I pray and I hope that each and every person within the sound of my voice doesn't have to go to a doctor. Nothing against doctors, right? But I hope that you don't have to go to a doctor. I hope that you can live well and that you don't get sick and that you can drink tea and eat and drink water and be well. But what we put in our bodies sometimes doesn't always match up because of economic conditions that we face. Sometimes that dollar menu at McDonald's is the only thing that we can afford. So we have to figure out ways to really get to the root of healthcare, which is poverty. And I'm sure we'll get some economic development questions and job creations, but how do we get people out of poverty, and how do we make sure that people can afford to eat well? Because you can't afford to get sick in this country.
Okay.
I very much look forward to signing on to the New York Health Act. This is a bill that, again, I cannot reiterate enough. It would save 98% of New Yorkers on healthcare costs. It would give every single New Yorker health care, and what is probably one of the most exciting parts of the bill is that the Rand Corporation, well, it's actually not part of the bill, but it can be part of the bill. What the Rand Corporation said in their study was that including long-term care would also be something that could be feasible. And I believe that not only is healthcare a basic human right, but that every single human being should be able to age with dignity. And this is very personal for me. In two different ways. I have a father that has Parkinson's disease, and his medication is incredibly expensive. This bill would not only alleviate the burden on my family, but all families, right? Who you can prepare until you can't. We don't know what's going to happen to us. Additionally, I've had grandparents who, one had long-term care and one did not. The grandparent that did not have long-term care only lived until their late 70s, and the one that did lived until he was 97. I think that affects our quality of life, our ability to have longevity in life. And I will just say this, because Senator Bailey alluded to this as well. Wellness and food deserts. There are food deserts in District 34, and all of these things are very much related. And access to healthy food is also part of healthcare, and so we have to invest in this too. We cannot have certain parts of the district and the state have produce that can feed their families and that is affordable, and then other parts that does not. It's all interrelated, and so I see healthcare as a very big umbrella, and this is just hopefully the beginning, the New York Health Act.
Okay, all right, thank you. So the second question is, it's no secret that the Bronx is last when it comes to health. Out of 62 counties that make up New York State, when it comes to health, the Bronx is number 62. So we're dead last when it comes to health. So with that being said, I am a fan of policies since I do healthy living. I'm a fan of policies, public health policies like banning trans fat, or the smoking bans, banning smoking in parks and restaurants and school grounds, you know? So I'm a fan of that because it actually makes my job a little easier. I'm not a fan of using the ban for nature in the age of gentrification when that's happening, because that's another topic where people could be forced out of their apartments. But with that being said, that's another topic. But with policies is not enough. All right, so there is an intersection where social and economic factors collide, and with personal choice. And that is where the social determinants of health comes in. All right, so with the social determinants of health, I do social determinants of health training, and it's maybe is not public knowledge, because most people blame themselves, or the blame is put on them that your health outcomes is because you're not working out enough or you're not eating healthy enough. But there are other factors that tie into that. I say that because I do community work and I bring it home with me. So I live a couple of blocks up on DeVoe. There's a young man who was actually like one of my students. So if I get a little choked up, you know why not? It's because this really means something to me. My community is DeVoe Terrace. It's more of a community, I guess, just because there's only 3 buildings and everything else is private houses. So within that, just a communal vibe. So, one second. All right, so Jermaine, he knows about nutrition. He was one of the kids from the neighborhood. He knows about the importance of eating healthy and exercising. And as of last Thursday, he's in the ICU. But he's not in the ICU because of fitness and nutrition. It's the social economics, the social determinants of health, that things that are beyond his control. So last Thursday, in an attempted robbery, because violence is a health issue, in an attempted robbery, he was shot through his arm and the bullet hit him in the heart, and now he's in ICU because of that. And with that being said, social determinants of health, the social economic factors go beyond personal choice. So whether it's someone who is a victim of violence that ends up in a hospital that has been working out or eating healthy or meditating and things of that nature, it still ends up in a hospital because of that. Whether it's a child who ate a lead chip that was healthy and ends up in a hospital because of lead poison. These are all social economic factors that affect our health. Whether it's someone who lives in a building full of asthma triggers and they're taking their asthma medication to try to control their asthma, but the asthma triggers are still in the building, like insects, rodents, leaky pipes, and those things aren't addressed, the person will have continuous returns to the ER. So within that, just thinking about it this way, there's a Park Avenue in the Bronx and there's a Park Avenue in Manhattan. Both of them have 2 totally different health outcomes. And I just want to know, will you commit to changing the narrative and investing in the social determinants of health aspects, that the root causes, which is, as Senator Bailey said, poverty, that really affect our community as far as when it comes to health outcomes? Things that are beyond personal choice. I'm going to step off on that.
So thank you for sharing that, brother. The short answer is absolutely. Matter of fact, it is precisely what I have been talking about this since I've been in the Senate, since 2011, and certainly since I've been a ranking member in the Health Committee. And my goal is, once I make the transition to become the chair of the Health Committee in the Senate, continuing to talk about it and make sure that you understand that as the chair, I'm going to be in that room, but all you're going to be with me, because that is ultimately what I want to make sure to do and bring these things up for my Bronx sites.
So 100% with you, and understanding that this is cyclical in nature, and that we have generational issues that have happened because of generational poverty and generational racism that's happened, and which has disenfranchised our people for quite some time. But it's about, what are you going to do to be a part of the solution as a part of the problem, right? So it's not just all legislative. It's making sure that your community is engaged and involved. And last year I did a senior walk with 150 seniors in the Co-op City section of my district. We walked around the track a couple times. We had some healthy food and so you can incorporate that into your daily living, right? We as elected officials, we can't just legislate everything, right? Because government can't overreach into your life and tell you what to eat and what not to eat, right? That's not our job to do. Our job is to make it simple, right? And give you options so that you can become a better part of the community. And I just want to make a point about the gun violence that you mentioned as being a public epidemic. You know, it's serious. Senate Democratic Conference, we've been there on any kind of reasonable gun legislation, and we look forward to doing that. And we've also been there on this opioid crisis. And, you know, Gustavo and I, we always put the crisis in quotation marks, because if you grew up in the Bronx, you've known this has been a problem for a long time. This isn't a crisis. This is not a new thing, right? When I was 6 years old, I had to dodge certain people that they used to call junkies and dope fiends. Now they call them people that need help. And this should have always been called people that need help. It should have never been criminalized. And the fact that the opioid task force in the state Senate exists without one Democrat on it is a political tragedy and a travesty. And because, again, this has been in my community since as long as I've been around. As long as I've been able to recognize the world, I've known that there's been an issue with opioids. It's not a crisis now. It's always been a crisis. The question is, what are we going to do to solve it? And you have my commitment that in addition to events and things to do, we institute real policy and real reform to put this opioid crisis to a halt.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story and for being vulnerable and emotionally honest. To echo a little bit off of what Senator Rivera and Senator Bailey have just said, any piece of legislation that I can help to write, that I can sign on to, that I can be a part of, that can not only help people out of poverty, but to improve the quality of life, I want to be part of. But outside of the legislature, and this echoes a lot of what Senator Bailey said, it's not just about the legislation. It's about showing up in your community and having conversations and trying to understand what the suffering and the issues are that are happening in each and every corner of the community. I am very committed, not only to having an inclusive and diverse and compassionate office that will not turn anyone away, but that will work collaboratively and make sure that every single person that comes through that door feels heard, that our solution, again, is collaborative, and that we are thinking of ways not only to reduce violence through legislation, but in our communities every single day, and how we can teach this in schools and to families and just be leaders outside of the state Senate and our state government, because it goes way beyond the legislative bounds of where we're at. So thank you for your question.
All right, great, thank you. Who's Bronx?
Our Bronx.
Who's Bronx?
Our Bronx.
Perfect, perfect. Before I move along to the next question, please remember everybody to pay close attention to the questions that are being asked, all right? Because these issues affect us individually, all right? And we really need to learn what they mean to us and what these candidates have to say. So please, please, when you go back home tonight, research some of these questions, some of these bills, learn about them before you go out there and vote, because they affect us personally, all right? So without further ado, I want to give it up now to Marsha Lopez. She is a small business owner and has a question around economic development for commercial tenants.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I'm very happy to get these answers. I'm very, very, very happy. I think these are the best answers I've heard in a long time. I guess we got 3 good candidates to work with us. Yes! All right. I'm Marsha Lopez. I'm a small business owner. I'm also a member of the Small Business Merchants. So here I go. About 60% of small businesses in the Bronx are harassed, pushed out, intimidated by their landlords due to their immigration status. These landlords are making their own rent increase by the thousands. In 2016, we worked with City Councilman Robert Carnegie, who was the chairman of the small business at the time, to push for a protection. The 851 bill passed in September 2016, but small business need more protection. How would you, as a state legislator, prevent small business owners from all the harassment? What other action could you take as a state legislator to protect small business owners who have served their community for years and even decades?
All right, we're going to start with Alessandra, followed by Gustavo, and then Jamaal Bey.
So, small businesses and ensuring that they have longevity empowers the community and also sends a message that is one of economic prosperity. And so ensuring that we not only stop harassment, but that we have legislation in place to stop these things, but even, let's go even further than that. Setting up a system that would allow for small business owners to call into, to be able to report whatever the abuses are without retribution is incredibly important. And so I know that in specific housing developments and in just regular apartments, that there are a lot of abuses that landlords are taking advantage of, whether it's it's freezing, but then you report it, and then they raise the heat so that when they come, then the heat is then it's higher, so then there's really not an issue. It's being able to hold all of the landlords accountable and making sure that if they are doing and behaving this way, that we have systems in place to catch these things. And the retribution aspect of it is incredibly important. So putting harsher penalties on landlords who actually do harass landlords, that they have a history of harassing small business owners is incredibly important. You could also even think about it in terms of any of the businesses or the landlords really that are part of a state registry that have a history of abuse should not be able to continue to rent their stores or their property to small business owners. There are different ways to be creative about this, and I think that legislation can absolutely add to this, but we have to be able to have penalties against these landlords.
Yeah. So I believe, and I'm not certain about this, but I do believe that there was at least an exploration of creating a rent stabilization system for business owners, so that so there would be similar protections for commercial tenants as there are for residential tenants, and I certainly support that effort. It actually reminds me, so most of the folks, well, certainly a lot of folks in this room are supportive of the Kingsbridge Armory and the project that is happening there. There's many folks in this room who were personally responsible for pushing it forward. And part of the reason why we supported it was because what's happening inside the Armory was something that was negotiated, and there was a community benefits agreement that was created, which is legally binding, which will ultimately have an impact on what's happening inside the building. Sadly and unfortunately, we don't have the same level of control which happens outside, which is why a few years ago, I remember that the building that's over there in the corner that has the new Capitol Diner in it had a new owner, and all of a sudden the Capitol Diner, along with the 12 other businesses that share that building, all of a sudden found themselves with a landlord who was demanding that they pay him twice as much rent for next month. And so we were able to push that back by bringing all the merchants together, working along with the community board, and just kind of making clear that it's like, we're not going to let you do that because you're ultimately going to push out a lot of these businesses. But there are efforts that are, I actually sent a text message to my staff because I believe that there is an effort to create a type of protection for commercial tenants that is similar to what's happening to residential ones. So we should talk further about that. Thank you.
So similarly, I believe that is in the state Senate, but I want to talk about not just legislative, because that would be the legislative fix if we get the rent stabilization, but I want to talk about more community engagement and how we can help our small businesses grow, right? Because a lot of it, if you got the income that you needed to get, you wouldn't be so prone to displacement, right? So we have to strengthen our bids, right? We have a great bid around here, the Jerome Gun Hill bid, but we have to do more as elected officials to support our business improvement districts and not only put money and resources into them, but create awareness around them. I did something last year with the Jerome Gun Hill bill called the Taste of the District, where I talked about different restaurants in the area, and where you can tell people and your constituents that you should eat at this restaurant, you should eat this place, because we have to be very careful about how we do things, because we can't promote businesses per se, but if we work with a bid, we can work with the bid to help strengthen our local economies, right? And also, I was meeting. Is Leah still here? Leah James? Because I had a meeting with Leah. Shout out to Leah because she came here. Yeah, shout out to Leah. Because we had a meeting about legal support that's being provided to small businesses. And that's really vitally important, right? So we have to make sure that we're not only giving information about businesses, but we have to make sure we're providing legal counsel for you. Because if it comes down to it, right? You can't go at this alone, right? You can't LegalZoom.com these things, right? There's no offense to LegalZoom.com or anybody who's ever gotten a form from there, but you need legal counsel to handle these issues, specifically with landlord-tenant issues, because depending on the lease, there's so many different intricacies in commercial leases, as opposed to in a residential one. So I look forward to continuing to look for this legislation, as Senator Rivera said, and supporting you otherwise as best as that I can.
Thank you.
We're almost coming to the end, guys. Now we're going to be taking the, it's off, okay. We're coming to the end, guys. These are the questions from the audience. Now we'll be reading out loud some of the questions we have collected from the audience members. Remember, you have 2 minutes to respond to.
Now we're gonna be quicker than that, so we can get through a lot of them.
We only have 4, bro. We only got 4. Okay, my first one is from Medora Jewett. Am I saying it correctly? Okay. In terms of NYCHA, how can you influence the current 30% formula to make it lower, as no one can afford the 30%? Gustavo?
I'm actually not familiar with the 30%, but no. So, tell you what, because I actually need to be better educated on this particular issue for NYCHA, and but you're obviously knowledgeable about it, is what I'm saying. So well, let's make sure to talk afterwards, because I'm not familiar with this, so I can't tell you. So please let's have a conversation about it.
Because this says NYCHA. It says NYCHA. That's where I'm confused. Jamaal, you want to answer a question?
So I'm again, the question, it seems a little, I just want to figure out exactly what the question is. I'm looking forward to. Okay. MCIs.
Okay, thank you. Let's let them answer.
Oh, yeah, MCIs, because when you said it with NYCHA, I was.
We really need to move on, though. Let's let them answer the questions, and then we can talk afterwards.
I would agree, and I just want specific clarity, because if you're saying it's not MCIs, I want to know exactly what you're talking about, so we can speak a little bit after. Yeah, what's up?
Let's go to the next question, and then you can talk to them afterwards. You can talk to Gustavo afterwards and clear up what the exact question is, and to the other candidates as well, okay? So we'll go to the next question, all right? With so much development going on, it's imperative to improve train and bus service. What are you going to do to fix issues within the MTA, including the need for elevator service and better schedules? We could start with Jamaal, then Gustavo, and then Alexander, okay?
Okay, perfect. So last week we had a meeting at the Borough President's office with Andy Byford, the chairman of the MTA. He came down and we expressed our displeasure with a lot of the bus service, because they talk about fix the subways, right? But a lot of times in the Northeast Bronx and the Northwest Bronx, we get around via buses. And I represent Co-op City, which is the largest affordable housing development in the country. And Co-op City residents rely on buses to get around. So I made that very clear. And the MTA is going to do a forum in Co-op City to speak about the necessity of revamping the bus routes, because they changed the 26 and the 28 and the 30 bus in Co-op City, if you're familiar with those, and they don't go to all the sections. And if you're in Co-op City, if you're a senior, and Co-op City is the largest naturally occurring retirement community, so we have a lot of seniors there. So in order to get around, they get around by buses. And it's an inconvenience if you live in Section 5 to have to take a bus to Section 4 and walk across that path. So we had to be very clear about that. And also, we had a press conference, myself, Assemblymember Dinowitz, District Leader Dinowitz, Assemblymember Fernandez, and a host of other members from the Tracy Towers community about getting an elevator, adding an elevator to the Mashulu Parkway 4 train in the capital plan. I signed the petition. I'm in full support of that, and it's not just for the people who are permanently disabled. It's for the mother or father with a stroller. It's for the person who sprained their ankle, and it's for the person, maybe you just want to go to a Yankee game and you have a cane, as was indicated in David Cruz's great story in the Norwood News. So rest assured, I am working on all those issues, and I'm looking forward to getting a resolution from the MTA.
So I'm very much committed to making sure that we fund the MTA, but we also have to expand mass transit. In District 34, there are a lot of areas that are transportation deserts. It's very challenging to go around unless you have a car. Not everybody has a car. Not everybody can afford to take a cab back and forth across the district. For some people, it takes them over 3 hours to get into the city. That's outrageous. What we're seeing is that traditional work is not, the model is changing. It's no longer 9 to 5. People are taking transit at all different times of the day, and so we have to accommodate our transit system to make sure that it's accommodating the needs of our changing economies. That's very important. Also, what I will say, only 5 out of the 26 subway stops in District 34 are ADA accessible. We have got to make sure that ADA accessibility is expanded. And just really to echo what Senator Bailey has said, it's not just, right, for those individuals who are handicapped or who need to use an elevator. It's also for mothers and fathers who have baby carriages or who have multiple children who cannot go up and down the stairs. Not every single person who's gonna walk past a woman or a man with the baby carriage is actually gonna help that person. I've seen people struggling always. And so we have got to make it more accessible.
Over 90% of the people in my district use a bus or a train every single day. So it is incredibly important to make sure that we defend public transportation and that we fund it appropriately. That has not been the case. And for a long time, one of the things that I found out when I was elected in 2011, somebody told me what a dedicated tax was. And you hear dedicated tax, dedicated transit tax, and you think a tax that is dedicated toward transit. Weirdly enough, if it doesn't have something called a lockbox on it, which is just language that says that you can only use the money for this particular purpose, then what happens? You rate it. You actually take the money and you sweep it, which is what the legislature and governors, including our current one, have done for way too damn long. So let's not pass the buck. Let's actually talk about the responsibility that is in the state. The MTA is a state agency. Let's make sure that we put that out there. Who runs the MTA? Well, the governor appoints the chair as well as most of the folks who are part of the board. So I got to tell you, you got to put responsibility where it is. Now, I have been saying that we need to make sure that it functions appropriately, that it is more equitably funded, because ultimately, when we have to do, when a lot of the money goes to debt service, meaning that it's the MTA paying back their debt as opposed to doing maintenance or paying for their operating costs, then what happens? Then they go to you and to me to make sure that we pay more for this freaking thing. So we have to make sure that we fund it more appropriately and that we hold those responsible who are actually responsible for the system.
Our final last Our final last question comes from Margaret. You know, I work around Gurok. I'm hoping I'm saying it right.
Margaret Della.
Huh?
Margaret Della.
It says Glow. Okay.
Margaret. It's a
Her
Margaret
question
lady.
is, how would you fairly distribute resources across the Northwest Bronx? Riverdale gets concerns addressed swiftly, but Kingsbridge and other poor neighborhoods get slow or no response. Biagi?
I'm assuming that you mean any funds. So let's just start with our schools. As I cannot say enough, I say this every single day, I've said this every single day for a very long time, that the money in the state budget must be allocated to our public schools. We have got to fully fund our public schools so that every child and every zip code has access to the same education. The distribution of funds is a responsibility and a very important responsibility of every single state senator. And what it requires is not only listening to the community to hear about what the needs are, but to understanding where there are gaps in funding, whether it has to do with senior centers, whether it has to do with housing, whether it has to do with food programs. There are so many different ways that we can distribute the funds, and those are just a few. And I look forward to thinking about other ways. But what I will say, one of the things that I wasn't able to talk about today is women's issues. Affordable housing, affordable childcare is an incredibly important issue to me. And so this would be one of the ways that I would like to implement it into the district.
I'll be quick. I think that it is very clear that sadly, resources, now there's a guy named I forget the name of the political scientist, and I use him a lot, but he describes politics as who gets what, when, and how. Right? And so the game of where those resources go has a lot to do with who makes decisions about those resources, which I go back again, as we end, like I began, it is incredibly important for the Democrats to get into the majority because there's many of us who have seen our communities, whether it's on education, on transportation, on health, on infrastructure, et cetera, be ignored for far too long. We want to make sure that we bring those resources to our communities, that we speak up on behalf of our constituents. It is what we have been doing for a long time, but we would want to do it as majority members, because when that happens, then we are the ones at the table negotiating the thing. So if you are at the table negotiating, then you can actually make sure that the interests of your constituency are discussed at that table. And that is what we want to make sure that we do. So yes, I am very familiar with the unequal distribution of resources, and I'm committed to making sure we get to the dang majority, so then we can make sure that they're distributed far more equitably than they have been.
So essentially, with the table metaphor, if you're not at the table, you're at the menu. I'm sure you're on the menu. I'm sure we've all heard that, right? And a lot of being in the minority in the state senate is we've been on the menu. We have been able to get the things that we've needed to get in the state senate to our communities, whether it's Riverdale or whether it's White Plains Road, right? Sometimes we don't get what we deserve based upon the political structure, and that's not an excuse, that's a reality. When you don't have a majority and when you're not in control of the budget, you cannot allocate funds to these communities as we want to. And I want to be also transparent about what happens with majorities, right? We need to obtain and sustain majorities, right? So it's not just to get a majority right now and then say the war is won. No, we got to continue to make sure that we plant the tree under the shade, which you may never sit, right? But you still plant the tree because that tree provides oxygen for you now, not just for now, but for the next generation. And so we have to think about funding the schools for the next generation, funding what my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old are going to do. That's the way I look at government. How do I want my kids to live? What am I doing now? And what my daughters are going to say if they look back in the history books and they say, Dad, you were in the state senate. What did you do about it? And I want to be able to say, baby girls, I did a lot. And I was able to bring home things for the community.
So, we have come to the end of the candidates forum. I'd like to thank each candidate, Alessandra Biaggi, Jamaal Bailey, and Gustavo Rivera, for coming and showing up and answering the questions. Remember, go out and vote, pledge to vote. So when they get elected, we hold them accountable, right? All right. Remember to fill out the issue committee sheets, and I hope to see you in other events supporting our community, okay? Who's Bronx? Who's Bronx? Thank you, y'all.